Namo Shakyamuni Buddha. So today we continue to discuss about the right mindfulness, and last time we discussed about the four foundations of mindfulness, and here I'd like to share with you. We have the mindfulness of the body, mindfulness of the feeling, mindfulness of the mind, mindfulness of the Dharmas, that all the teaching of the Buddhas. And we discussed before the mindfulness of the body, including mindfulness of our breaths, mindfulness of our postures, how we sit, how we stand, how we lie down, mindfulness of our activities like driving, cooking, washing the dishes, and so forth. Mindfulness of anatomical parts, that means our physical parts. The four elements, that means the water, the fire, the winds, and the earth within our bodies. The mindfulness of the corpse in the case when someone passes away, we can see and absorb how the corpse decay. So those are the mindfulness of the body. So that's what we talked last time. Now let me discuss today the mindfulness of the feeling. We have 6 types of feeling: the pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral. Pleasant, we have worry and unworry. For example, when we talk about the worry pleasant, like when we eat ice cream, we enjoy the taste of ice cream. When we talk about the unworry pleasant, this means the state of samadhi or concentration. We feel blissful. And unpleasant, worry and unworry. Unpleasant worry, like when we heard someone scold us, we don't like that sound. That's make us feel unpleasant. And unpleasant, unworthy, that means when we sit in meditation, somehow we have the visions or illusions of the black subject, object, or anything that makes us being afraid of or worry of. And the last one, the neutral feeling of the worthy and unworthy. A neutral worthy feeling, like when we pass by a stranger, we don't have any feeling about them. And neutral unworthy feeling, this means when we sit in meditation, we don't have any thoughts, any feeling at all. So these are the 6 types of feeling, and here a charge of our common noble feelings like guilt, happy, horrible, hot, hunger, hurt, and so forth. And there's some feeling that we can discuss further. Feeling like doing something. The first one, feeling like doing something like because of the habit and preference, because of the physical reason, because of an emotion or attitude. Here, feeling that do something because of habit and preference, like we like to drink tea every morning, late at night. That's habit we feel that we like to drink tea every day. That's our habit. And because of the physical reason, uh, we feel that every morning we like to eat breakfast because of and emotions. We like to have fun. So that's why we want to watch a cartoon, funny cartoon, and maybe feeling like doing something without necessarily want to do, when we are unaware of what is triggering the habit that causes the feeling, like we the attention we not be aware of our uh, mm, habit, whichever trigger our habit that causes our feeling. For example, when we tired, we just lie down to rest after work. We may not pay attention much why we want to lie down, uh, so that we can have good feeling when we are lying down. And we're not thinking about the physical reason that causes the feeling. Uh, we don't think much about the reason what we have the feeling, especially the physical reason. Like we run the treadmill automatically. When the feeling is motivated, stimulated by an emotion or attitude, like when we feel uncomfortably, if people look through our windows, that's why we close the window, because we don't want other people to look at things through our windows. And both feeling like doing something and wanting to do it. So it has the urge arise from the habit, preference, or physical reason before being mindful of that reason. Like we just like to watch the funny cartoon. That's our habit uh, before we are mindful why we like to watch that funny cartoon. At the same time as being mindful of a liberated reasons, like we write an email to send to our friends. We have intention to write that email to send to our friends. When an emotions or attitude supports a contrast motivation, when we see the homeless people standing, sitting, even lying down on the street, we feel sympathy for them. That's why we step out of the cars and be put to that person. So those are the feeling. And another thing is wanting to do something. When we have that feeling, we want to do something because of the habit, and we're mindful of what trigger that habit. When we um, do meditation, uh, whether it's 10 minutes, 20 minutes, and so forth in every morning, because we have that habitual patterns of sitting meditation. Um, and because of a preference and mindfulness of that preference, we like to eat lunch mindfully. Uh, we like to eat lunch in silence because of a deliberated reason. We want to set up a schedule for our class, I set up for our courses because of the feeling like doing it. Like we like to cook for our families to enjoy during the holiday season. or some special day. Want to do something but not feeling like doing this. Like when mindful of a reason of doing something, like we prefer to eat quietly, uh, an urge to do it does not arise beforehand. So we just want to sit in meditation in the morning. Uh, there's no urge for us to do, but we get the habit of sitting in meditation in early morning. An urge to do it does not arise from an emotion or attitude. Like we just like to walk in meditations. So there's no emotion, there's no attitude, but we just like to walk around. And to make a sensitive decision depends upon how we feel when we feel like we doing that and why, what we want to do and why, what we need to do and why. So depend upon the situation, we can make a decision. So once we certain about the facts, we need to determine with our reflection whether we want to do those things, whether we feel that we like to do those things, whether our intuition tells us to do, whether we want to do, or whether we need to do. So those are the conditions, a situation that may affect to our feelings, and of course, um, it may affect to our decision whether we want to do those things or not. So next one, we contemplate, be mindful of the mind, be mindful of the thoughts, and this two different characteristics of the mind: the ordinary state of mind, and the higher state of mind. The ordinary state of mind, including lust, anger, delude, distraction, and the higher state of mind, including the great mind, is surpassable mind, the concentrated mind, the liberate mind. So these are the types of the mind, the ordinary one and the higher state one. So here the Buddha reminds us when we are mindful with our mind and the mind object, that's the third one in the four foundations of mindfulness. So let me go back here so you can see the charts right here. So the mind, we have ordinary state of mind, higher state of mind. That's what we learning now. So in this, the contemplations, mindfulness, so we need to recognize about our five senses: the seeing, the hearing, the smelling, the tasting, the touching. And we need to recognize as if we think that we see the object, we are not seeing the object. If we think that we hear the sound, that means we are not hearing the sound because we focus on the seeing. So if we want to see, want to hear them clearly, we need to see them, hearing them with their attention, and that's real seeing, that's real hearing. For example, let's say if I look at the computer and I can look at the screen of computer. That's all. And with that bare attention, I can recognize how the screen look like. But if, let's say, I think, oh, this screen is big, small, and so forth. So it's not the screen anymore because we have the discrimination in my mind. So I could not see clearly, deeply about the actual screen of this computer. So here our five sense, the nose, the eyes, the ears, and the tongues, and the mind. And as long as we have what we call bare attention, we just see things as the way they are, without any kind of filter. We have direct experience about the object. See the three balls. We see the real object. Otherwise, if we see without ego, without identities, we would have want, we will have craving, we would try to avoid, we would have hate, we will have destruction and the polluted mind, and that brings the suffering. For example, if we hear someone say something, if we can hear that sound, that's called bare attention. But what happens if we hear something, let's say they say something about us, and it makes us angry because they say something about a mistake. And at that moment, we want to avoid to hear that type of scolding or criticism. And of course, we hate that, we don't like that. So that's why whenever the sound pop up, whenever we hear this last type of scolding sound again, that's some of suffering for us because we don't hear with our bare attention, but we hear through the filter of our ego, with attachment to our self-centering. So that's why the want go with the craving, the avoiding go with the hatred or destruction is make us suffering. So that's why here the Buddha teach us that we have to note, to recognize our intention. So we need to recognize that every action should have intention, and we take notes of the major intention while we sitting, standing, lying down, and so forth. So we need to recognize intention while we sit up, while we stand, while we walk. We take a note of the major emotion like anger, greed, and so forth. So if we are not mindful with our major emotions, we would be controlled by our mind, because our mind has its own lives. So that's why we need to be mindful of our five aggregates: the form, the feeling, the thoughts, and the consciousness. And sometimes if we don't pay attention, we would see it in different ways. And look at here, the person in the right side, look at the number as number 9, and the people stand the left side, look at the number is like number 6. So we have to see things at the way they are. Otherwise, we would attach. We would say, "Oh, this is number 9," but the other person say, "Oh, there's number 6." We try to fight. So again, We have to see things as the way they are. And here, the what we call the five aggregates, the forms, the feeling, the perception, the mental formation, and the consciousness. The form that's in our body, that's was composed by the four elements: earth, water, wind, fire. Uh, of course, it includes the bodies, the sense organs, and the feeling, the sensation, good feeling, bad feeling, neutral feeling. That's what we can talk about. Perception. That's our network of verbal conception, network of non-verbal conception, network of ideas, network of impression, network of association. That's what we think about. The mental formation, that's been our habitual patterns, our habit of drinking tea in the morning or coffee, uh, and so forth. And the consciousness, again, we studied before, the eight type of consciousness that later on control our karmas, our speech and body. So let us skip this. And here, go back. We need to pay attention on our intention. We take the notes of the intention before we act on it. For example, we need to recognize why we want to sit down in meditation, why we want to walk around the house. But we need to recognize that our intention is constantly changing, um, because our mind frustrated in every moment of our life. So there's our intention. So we need to be mindful of our intention with clarity, stability, and alertness. So when we go to the cars, start the engine, and drive the cars, we need to know the reason why our intention of driving the car to work, to school, to see our friends, and so forth. We need to be mindful of our intention with compassion, loving kindness, and joyfulness. So again, in Buddhism, we need to develop this type of intention, and we discussed before in the right views of right intention. That whichever thing we do, we need to have the type of right intention, especially the right intention of compassion, love, kindness, and joyfulness. Otherwise, if we have the intention to harm others, we will lead our body and speech uh, to do the harms to ourselves and others. And we need to recognize the non-self and discontinuities of consciousness is penetrate beyond the forms. We just watch the forms as pure sensation, like what we just discussed, the bare awareness, bare attention. When we see the birds flying across the sky, if we can see that there is no suffering at all. But if we see the birds flying uh, away from us, and if we have intention to capture them or to shoot them down, but if we miss shoot them down, we'll be angry. So if we can see them without bare attention, as we can have the awareness. And so does the hearing. Seeing and hearing is a type of knowing. When we see and hear them with our bare attention, see the discontinuities of consciousness, that means it change from moment to moment. Consciousness, our thoughts are changing from moment to moment. So we are completely new person in every second when we see our thoughts are changing. Because one moment we happy, um, that means we happy at that moment. Another moment we sad, again we become a sad person. Uh, so every moment our thoughts are changing and we become a new person. So that's why there's no status person at all, because of that type of tension in our mind. And that's why when we have anger in our mind, we need to be mindful. We need to take the notes that um, yes, we have anger. At that moment, anger will be disappear. But if we don't recognize anger, we would let anger overcome our mind. So we can recognize the difference between the defilements and the pure mind. Uh, and our awareness changes from moment to moment. This would not stay in one spot. Our consciousness is more often known than mind. So basically here the Buddha say that we need to recognize if we have an emotion and a thought, we need to recognize. Uh, so if we are in the state of deep noting and being very aware of the discontinuity and tension of mental state, then you can see the discontinuity of the consciousness itself. So all the dharmas are mere phenomenal experiences and occurrence. So they are voice of self. There's no real self because things are changing from moment to moment. Um, Especially in the five skandhas, but the forms, the feeling, perception, and so forth. And so we can recognize that experience the voice of self through these continuities of the consciousness. If we recognize as the attachment to the self will be abandoned. For example, we recognize as our body is changing moment by moment. Our body cell, uh, uh, our feeling are changing too, our thinking, and so forth. There's no real self at all. That's why we uh, have that type of recognition, and it would be helpful us to let go of the attachment to the real self that we used to attach to. And here, the next step for us to be mindful of our mind. After we have developed some type of concentrations, we need to open or broaden the field of awareness to notice the state of mind so that we can allow our state of mind to review by itself. So if we have some kind of judgment to our mind, so we just let go of that judgment and return back to the breath. For example, why we follow the breath when we have inhalation and exhalation. And let's say if we have a thought of, the inhalation breath is too short or too long. And that moment, if we have that thought, it's better to bring back that thought to the breath. Just be aware or be mindful of the breath. If we play around with that judgment, we get lost of that awareness of our thoughts. So if we become lost in our thoughts and we notice it, we appreciate that moment of noticing it. So we would be mindful and then gently return that attention to the breath, and continue to be aware of our breath. And so again, while we follow our breath, somehow some thoughts pop up in our mind that want to stand up to check an email, or not a thought that want us to buy some things at the supermarket, but we recognize that's not the time. So we just let that thought go and gently return our awareness to the breath instead of playing around with all kind of thoughts. And so during the day, we need to take a few moments to be mindful of our breath, our body sensation, our feeling, and the state of mind. So that's the advice of the Buddha. So this instruction for mindfulness have a skillful and unskillful state of mind. So we need to reflect on whether our state of mind contributes to peacefulness or stress in the moment. So let's say while we're sitting there, somehow we feel irritated. Now we know that the state of stress. But if we feel our mind is so calm, and that's moment we recognize the state of peacefulness. So we need to notice the effect of our state of mind. If we recognize the compassionate state of mind, we could accept them. And if we recognize some kind of judgment, holding or pushing away, we need to let them go. So if we feel confused about what we experience, it's better we be mindful with that kind of state of mind, the confused state of mind. So if we could not recognize what's going on in our mind, it's better to return to our breath gently. So again, the next one is that when we recognize the greed, the craving in our mind, the anger in our mind, the delusion, the laziness, distraction in our mind. The Buddha said that we can take a notice that we can recognize them, and if we aware that we don't have any craving, hatred, delusion, and so forth, and we take the note of that, so that we would not be controlled by those feeling, by those state of mind. And so when unconsidered mind arise, the Buddha said that we need to recognize this. We need to bring our awareness to our breath. So if we recognize that our mind free of any kind of the defilements, are not free from any kind of defilements, we recognize them. So we would dwell in our mind, we would perceive our mind in the mindful way, without any kind of attachment. So we recognize as there's no self, as if so there's reason for us to let go of the attachment of the ego, and so we are mindful of the mind, and so that we can develop or live with that insight, with that awareness, so that we would not attached to anything. We would not have any craving, wrong will, or dwell in any kind of things, whether it's the tangible or intangible things. So that is the importance that we need to recognize. So again, in summaries, we see that this mind, we know this the ordinary state of mind, the loss of free of loss, the craving of free of craving, hatred of free of hatred, we recognize them all. Delusion and delusion, we recognize. So that is the ordinary state of mind, the highest state of mind. In our practice meditation, we could recognize that we have the concentration, we have the mindfulness, our mind are free of those anger, craving or not. So this is state of mind. And the next one, we could recognize the mental qualities of the minds, including the five hindrance. The five hindrance includes the sensual desire, the ill will, the sloth, the stubbornness, the restlessness, the worries, the skeptical doubt. So those are the five hindrances. That is the mental qualities of our mind. And the next one, we recognize the five aggregates of grasping, including the forms, the feeling, perceptions, mental formation, and consciousness that we have discussed. And let us review. Okay, here the ill will, the desire, the sloth and slothful, the restlessness, the doubt. So this antidotes in to deal with the five hindrances. So when we have ill will, we need to develop the loving kindness, or give that person a gift to transform that ill will. And so when we have desire, we think about the consequences about our desire. When we have the sloth as topo, we need to walk, look at the light up to our determinations. When our mind is so restless, so we need to refocus on the breath, focus on the thought. When we have the doubt, we talk to someone like our teacher and our friends about the practice. So that's the antidote to the five hindrances. And now let us review about the five aggregates. And the matters has been the body, the elements of extension that the earth, element of coherence of the water, elements of the heat that how the heat, elements of motion that's been the winds, the mind sensation of the feeling, perception, mental formation, and consciousness. We discussed before as the four great elements of the body, and this one is the aggregate of consciousness. We talked about the 8 types of consciousness before, and the third is perception. When we see the box, we recognize that's our recognition of the object. And the aggregate of sensation, when we smell, when we see things, we have the sensation through our eyes, our ears, our nose, and so forth. And the aggregate of mental formation, that is from our six sense organs that interact with the object, as an object, like the eyes interact with the object, we could view that object, whether it's beautiful or ugly, we recognize. And that is mental formation. Uh, uh, so we see them with the habit. Oh, okay. I can see that hamburgers that I get used of that. I know that before. So these are the five aggregates. And here the next one, whether it's this material form, feeling, condition, uh, and volition, consciousness, all of them impermanence. So not things last forever. So these are the five aggregates. And the next one, we study about the six internal and external base, sense base, like eyes with the form, ears with the sound, the nose with the smell, the tongue with the tastes, the body with tangibles, the mind with the thought. So these are the charge of the sensory contact. The eyes with the visible object, sensory contact, ears with the sound, sensory contact. So let us move on to the next one, where we talk about the mindfulness of dharmas. That means we mindful with the Buddha teachings, and that includes the what we call seven factors of enlightenment. So the first one, the mindfulness. We know that that's what we are mindful, that's what we are aware of, things that we're doing in our body, mind, speech. So we recognize them in a non-superficiality. We keep the object in our view. We face to face with the object. We see the point of truth and three Dharma seal. So the Dharma of the mindfulness is because of our awareness, that brings the clear comprehensions, the pure experience. So the next one is investigation of the Dharma. So we have to develop the wisdom or insight that can differentiate the bodies and the mind, and recognize that both of them are impermanent. They are unseparatory and non-self. With that type of recognition, and we know the true nature of Dharma. Dharma here again, in the sense that it include or cover everything, whether it's tangible object or intangible object. It cover everything. So we know the true nature of Dharma. That means they are impermanent. So if we had that type of understanding, we would dispel the darkness, the delusion in our mind. We recognize the ultimate realities of life. We have the spontaneous insight that help us to have clear investigation or contemplations. We would have the balanced mind. We would make friends with others people, especially the wise one. We could reflect on the profound truth, so that we can make the total commitment in our practice. So these are the mindfulness of my investigation of the Dharma. So since time is up, let me finish here today. So next time we can discuss further about this type of seven uh, Dharma, 7 factors of enlightenment. Nam Mô Shakyamuni Buddha.